ċans ta' deb kellek ċans, ma ħattux.
Għaliex?
Meta saqsik jekk aħna x'nisimgħu kont tgħidlu lew.
Għetlu hello zjeru. Il-rispondejtu ta' studentu.
Mela. Let's get the attendance started. Eva. Luke, giving you stammer.
Into an opportunity. The only nation that can be defined by a single word.
Stay. Three. Okay. Mela. Until that becomes something interesting. I have something to show you. Let me just check my camera before we try it out. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, if you may recall, I had told you there's something interesting coming along, and basically it arrived. So, if you check the video feed now, okay, the Wooger arrived.
Okay? Damn.
So it's a 6-speaker. It's a 6-speaker haptic vest. Basically, there's a speaker here, down by the side, and down by the side and at the back. Basically, it plays frequencies between 0 and 200 Hertz, which are hard to hear unless they are very loud, and most often, because the higher frequencies are louder, you tend not to hear them. So the difference is that you actually feel them rather than hear them through this vest. I've tried it on songs, I've tried it on a trailer. My son wanted to try it on the Jurassic Park trailer. Good choice. My daughter was looking for bass boosted songs. Yes, and then she was asking me for help. For my wife, I know she likes a lot a particular dance. So I found her, and she was clapping like crazy at the end. She likes the Irish river dance, or Lord of the Dance. Basically, they have a lot of feet, very quick feet tapping. And yes, through this, you can actually feel the feet taps, all over your torso, basically. Well, we basically were lucky because there was a 50% off refurbished versions, and yeah, we got the refurbished version. I mean, I haven't tried the real one, so I can't compare the refurbished with the real one. But the refurbished one feels quite top notch. Now the idea is to test it with VR, right? So you would be visually and orally in VR, and then haptically also being present there as well. So that's something else we want to consider. Hi Floyd, welcome.
Hi sir, thank you.
Just checking, so Jamie and Glenn still on the way. Okay.
Out of curiosity, sir.
Yes.
What compatibility does the vest have? As in, with what can you connect it?
Good question. So I can show you this. Can it focus most? So basically, there is a USB connection, and the audio in. audio in, and then you can connect your headphones onto it. So this is only the body. You can connect the headphones there, and you also wear the headphones. But it also has a Bluetooth. So basically, to my mobile, I connected via Bluetooth. To the PC, I connected via USB.
Okay.
Basically,
I'm asking because, for example, let's say you want to connect it to enough PlayStation for Beat Saber, per esempio. That would be a massive experience, especially if you have this bass boosted vest apart from the VR and apart from the headphones, apart from the sound coming through your ears, ġifieri.
exactly. So basically, you can replace it instead of your headphones. Because after all, you don't need to program anything special. I mean, this just takes the lower frequencies and puts them as vibrations through these big speakers. And you can also control. So sorry again. You can also control the volume. So the idea is that from the computer or whatever device, you put it on full volume, and you control the volume of your headphones through these lateral settings here, which you connect to the headphone here. So this controls the headphone, and these two, the plus and minus, no, up and down, they control the sensitivity to the lower frequency. So these control the vest. These control the headphones. These control the vest. So you can have low headphone but very heavy vest movement in reply. Yes, so it would be probably very immense. So those reactions of the people you see on the Woojer site are not exaggerated so much. It's quite present. I mean, knowing what to expect. I mean, even my reaction to the Enchroma was okay, nice colors, sort of. For this, sort of, I knew what to expect, but kids, wife, etc. Impressive. Okay.
Have you tried with the USB? Does it like have surround over USB? So like, if a noise comes from behind you, it only works with the back speakers.
Yes, depending. So I still have to test that because with games I only tried it with Demeo, to be honest. I haven't yet tried it with enough to detect the pan part. I've seen reviews where they said the panning is not so great, but I would like to test it myself to see if that's the issue or not.
Oh, okay.
But they're separate, so at least I would expect at least the left and the right to be
Esatto.
separate themselves. FM. I could try to wear it as a headphone and see if I can hear. But I would be a bit afraid of my ear, the eardrum. Okay. So, basically, thank you everyone, because you have either submitted or you've sent me an extension request, so no issues there. And as I said, I mean, hurry up and wait never helped, so I said, okay, let's sort of help them balance between life issues, exams coming up, assignments in between, and that's gonna work. Now, of course, try to match to keep up with the given deadline. I have updated each of your Moodles with the extension, so you should have the date also present there. Okay. Now, yeah, we continue where we left off last week. So I'll switch off the video and turn on the screen share. So please join up. I'll take it off because you have to do it tight with yourself so that you can feel everything, but then having it on for 2 hours is not so comfortable. Although there have been streamers who said they kept it on for 2 hours, and they would have gotten lost into the game. So they feel it as part of the experience, and it's working. I mean, I'm not going to listen to my voice on it. Okay. So a bit of explanations to do today with respect to sampling rates and sampling and playback and filtering. But yeah, fine. So this is the second part of the final topic that is examinable. And whilst last week we talked about the hardware part, okay, the hardware part that is visible, that is tangible. Today we are looking at what's happening once we have that data sent over to the machine. Okay, so look at recording, mixing, and mastering, and looking at compression. There are two types of compression, but also they mean different things, so we'll explain that as well. Notion of channels, and below, okay, you have here below in this diagram below, we see this kind of sequence, okay, this pipeline. So we're getting this physical audio signal coming in through the microphone diaphragm, all right, and going through the recording process, into the mixing process, mastering process, and then we have the mediated audio product. Mediated as in it has passed through a medium. It has passed through a medium. So, opening up that pipeline into a bit more detail, we can see the recording to playback process and how the signal changes form. So we're starting off with sound as a change in air pressure through molecules within the air, but of course they could also be water or some dense medium. That pressure is being captured via the diaphragm on a microphone and converted into a voltage signal, converted into some form of electricity. That voltage then passes through an analog to digital converter, which converts the analog voltage values into digital data, in this case numbers, floating point numbers. And as you can see, it looks pixelated. The proper word is quantized. Okay, it's called quantization, and that is stored in memory for later playback, when those numbers are read from memory, are sent over to the digital to analog converter. And if you recall, when we did pure data, okay, our speaker, actually I can bring that back, PD. When we had this, okay, our speaker system was the DAC. I'll zoom in a bit. Okay, the DAC, and that was our speaker system. Okay, it has no output, it has two inputs, basically left and right. It's a stereo. We could also have had our ADC. Okay, the ADC would be the microphone. If you look up the help for that, provide audio input and output respectively, whether it's analog or digital. By default they are stereo, but you can specify the number of channels as input. So in this case, input from channel 5 only, and this one is output to channels 1, 2, 5 and 23. And then depends what those channels eventually would be. Okay. So the ADC, DAC map nicely to what we were doing with pure data earlier this month. Okay, Let's close that off for now. Cool. So the aim is to digitally store physical audio in electronic format so that you can play it back when necessary as faithfully as required. Of course, this isn't the only time we were doing this. When we had long plays, okay, when we had magnetic tape, we were also doing a similar process, storing a replayable form of the sound that is captured. Issa, analog to digital conversion, however, requires that we convert a continuous value, the analog signal, into a sampled value, into a digital value that can be stored using numbers. This brings in the notion of sampling, and sampling is something that is done repeatedly, something that has a repetition of so a number of repetitions per second. So just like sound has a frequency, okay, just like sound has the repetition of the wave, how often happens means how high or low the pitch is. In a similar way, the sampling process also has a frequency, okay, that we call the sampling rate. So both of them are measured in hertz. Please don't get confused, okay? The both of them have the same unit of measurement. But one hertz is, well, they both mean cycles per second. One is cycles per second, sorry, that's the sound, and the other one is samples per second, okay? Cycle is the full wave, up, back, down, and back to the center. That's the full cycle. The sampling rate is how every time we're taking a sample, every time we're measuring a sample. So we can mention some common sampling rates, but also highlight the importance of the Nyquist rate, and the Nyquist frequency, and why we have two of them. And then talk a bit also about aliasing. So, what kind of sample rates are we talking about? So, the old telephone lines, okay, their normal maximum sampling rate was of 8 kilohertz, 8,000 samples per second. CD audio is about 44,100 samples per second, and studio quality would be 96 kilohertz. 96,000 hertz samples per second. Of course, the higher the sampling rate, the more memory is needed per second of audio. So in the first case, in the kinds of telephones, we need to store 8,000 samples for every second of audio. Whereas in the studio case, we're storing 96,000, so 12 times as much data per second as for telephones. CD audio is a bit in the middle. CD audio basically is. Let's stop there. We'll explain shortly why it is 44. So the higher quality means bigger number of samples per second, means larger storage requirements. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, what determines the sample rate that we need? How do we choose between a sample rate and another? I have mentioned that waves have a frequency in hertz and samples have a sampling rate. And the two are very related. Let's skip all the text and just focus on the pictures for now, on the diagrams down below. On the bottom left, I have over here, I have a 1 hertz wave. Okay, a 1 hertz wave means in 1 second it does one complete cycle. Okay, it goes from 0 to 1, back to 0 to -1, and back to 0. And then I have the next second. So each second I have one full cycle. If I have a sampling rate of 1 Hertz, it means that I am taking a sample every second. So if I take the sample at this point here, okay, 1 second later, when I take my next sample, because the wave is also 1 Hertz, I will find the wave at the exact position as it were. And in the next wave, I will find it exactly as it were. So when I join the dots, because that is the only measurement I have for that wave, okay, that sample taken there. When I join the dots, it's a flat line, okay? There's no change of amplitude. There is no information. So I am not able to capture a 1 Hertz signal with a 1 Hertz sampling rate, because each time I end up seeing it at the same spot. This is like when you see a helicopter flying, but the blades seem to be stationary. Okay, that's because the speed of the blades rotating about their axes happens to be equal to the frame rate, to the capture rate, of the camera. So it's always capturing those blades in the same position, and it looks like it is stationary, but it's not. What if I increase by 1 my sampling rate? What if I sample at 2 Hertz? This basically means, apart from that measurement taken on that spot, I am also taking a second measurement halfway between them. Halfway between those two. And this will repeat itself for every wave. Okay, so it's this and this, this and this. And if I were to join the tops and join the bottoms separately, I would have 2 flat lines. But they are not joined separately, they are part of the same wave. So basically I have this triangle wave approximating my sine wave. So it's better than this one, because this one it was not captured at all. It's not as good because, for example, the amplitude is not big enough. Okay, this one is a bit short, and this one is very far away from the actual one. So, at least we need twice as many samples as waves. At least twice as many samples as waves. If we can have more, the more points I'm going to have over that wave, and the more accurate my measurement is going to be. Of course, if I can have as many samples as possible, I will get very close to the original wave. But that then will mean lots of data, which may be a problem. So I have to find a compromise between the amount of data I can store and the accuracy of the signal being measured. So if I need to capture at least twice the frequency, knowing that our hearing range is between 20 Hz and 20 kHz, then I must use a sample rate which is at least 40 kHz. At least 40 kHz. Because higher is better, and also because 4400 is a multiple of it's a nice binary number. We use 44100 for CD audio. DVD audio, we even use 48 kHz. 48 kHz. So that 44 there is necessary to capture the full range of audio that we as humans can listen to, can perceive. So the minimum sampling rate that you need to use depends on the highest frequency that you want to capture. Again, the minimum sampling rate must be more than twice the highest frequency you want to capture. So you must consider analyze what frequencies you're going to be measuring, take the highest frequency, double it. That's the minimum sampling rate you need to have. That's called the Nyquist rate. So for a given frequency, the Nyquist rate is twice that frequency. And that's your minimum sampling rate that you want to use. Make sense? Anyone not clear about that?
Sort of on my end.
Ala,
I mean,
why is it twice the highest frequency? Because it's the maximum.
As that.
Okay.
So the highest would be the maximum. Of course, a sampling rate of 10,000 hertz. It can capture 5,000 hertz, it can capture 4,000 hertz, 3,000, 2,000, because it's more than twice those numbers.
Yeah.
So you want the biggest one, and then multiply by 2
Then the rest is covered.
to get the least rate you must use to capture that particular frequency.
Thank you.
Welcome. Issa, for example, we mentioned here the 8,000 samples per second, right? The difference between the pronunciation of the letter S, right? And the letter F. So S for Simon, right? F for Frederick, for front, right? On a telephone, it's not so clear to distinguish between the two. And I had a student who worked with customer care whose name was Cedric with a C. Okay, so Cedric. And when people called and he gave them his name, they would think that he said Frederick. So they would say, hello, Frederick. It's not Frederick, it's Cedric. Yes, Frederick. Yeah. And I always say that kind of story. Now, once I had my mother's cousin from the US visiting us, and he was coming by bus. And he called me, and I was waiting for him at Bujabba, and I told him, okay, you must stop on the bus stop called Saif, Summer, right? I didn't say Summer, unfortunately, I just said Saif. I'm waiting, the bus comes along, doesn't get off, another bus comes along, doesn't get off. He calls me again, listen, I couldn't find the bus stop number 5. I am at the bus terminus. Can you come and pick me up? Like, no. I fell for my own story. Of course, he did not perceive the letter S. He thought I said F. Saif is not a word he's used to listening to. I mean, he's born American. his father was Maltese. So of course he did not question the word Saif. He just thought I said 5. And that's how I had a nice walk to the bus terminus. So.
Sir,
Yes.
just out of curiosity, is that the reason as to why then the phonetic alphabet was invented? Was this part of the reason? Because if phonetic alphabet has been created for the military, and if they were communicating via telephones, radios, whatever, it would have been imperative for the actual communication to be concise and precise.
Exactly. Yes.
So if, for example, like you were saying, Frederick and Cedric, the S and F, they are replaceable. Was that part of the reason as to why the phonetic alphabet was created then? Do you have any idea?
Exactly. So Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, right?
Loud.
Exactly. Yes, the idea was to have clear instructions because, of course, if you give a target to attack and it is pronounced wrongly or rather perceived wrongly, you could be attacking friendly friendly targets. So yes, that's of course one of the reasons. Of course, some games. Let's go for something less troubling. Some games which use voice input also have a similar problem. That audio perception needs to understand what you're saying, and if there's ambiguity, it will be a bit of a problem how to understand that. One game that actually tackles this very well is a military game. So again, there's specific language that you have to use in order to convey that. I organized a training school for a number of PhD level participants last September, and I was planning an ice-breaking session, giving them a quiz over Maltese-related information. And I was aware that I had quite an international range of people from the US, from Pakistan, from Norway, from Estonia, Italy, Spain, Greece, Iceland, the whole shebang. And when I was giving the options for this quiz, I said to myself, listen, these people will have their own accents. They will be wearing masks. You won't be able to see what they're saying. Are you sure you'll be able to distinguish between B, C, and D? Because they're all E, right? So, yes, I used vowels, I used numbers, I used hand signals, hand gestures to make it fun, but also to avoid specifically this problem of not distinguishing between similar sounding sounds, syllables. So yes, we have to think about communication issues when dealing with frequencies, and that's also why, as you grow older, as we grow older, not even I, of course, we tend to understand less, not because the intensity, but because of frequencies. We start confusing the S and the F, and words start becoming strange and different, and we start listening to things that are not really being said. So,
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question. So, Nyquist rate is something you need to determine once you are given the frequency. Okay, we have to capture this frequency. Well, you can determine the Nyquist rate. The other form, the Nyquist frequency, is the opposite, right? So given a sampling rate, the Nyquist frequency is the highest frequency you can capture with that sampling rate. So if I have a 10 kilohertz sampling rate, the maximum frequency I can capture is 5000 hertz. I can capture 4, 3, 2, 1, but the maximum is 5000 hertz. So the 8 kilohertz sampling rate of telephone can capture at most 4 kilohertz, which is why when you put a music on hold, that's why it sounds so crappy, right? Because the harmonics of the instruments that you're listening to are being cut off or aliased, as we'll explain, and you can't hear them well. The CD format uses 44.1 kilohertz and it can capture at most the 22. The 96 kilohertz, we mentioned this before, the ultrasonic, can capture 48 kilohertz, which is far beyond what we are able to hear, but as we said, that's important if we want to do psychoacoustic modeling. If we then want to model what happens when these frequencies are played together in the same space, and so their harmonics intertwine, and through destruction, through wave destruction, create new frequencies below the 20 kilohertz range, and so they become audible. So the Nyquist frequency is half a given sampling rate. The Nyquist rate is double a given frequency. Okay, so oh crap, okay, wait a moment. My Android just I got triggered by my voice. Nice. So Nyquist, first of all, what is Nyquist? Nyquist was a surname. Okay, they were actually a couple. I don't know their gender. Nyquist and Shannon. Nyquist passed away, and so Shannon named this findings after him, and so it was called Nyquist. But whether it is double or half, it depends whether it's the frequency or the rate. Remember, the rate is always double the frequency. Okay, the rate is double the frequency. Whenever you're given the rate, Nyquist frequency is half. If you're given the frequency, Nyquist rate is double. Nyquist rate is double. Issa, what happens? What happens to those frequencies which are above the Nyquist frequency? Those frequencies which are above the Nyquist frequency. The example given here is that I have an 8 kilohertz sampling rate, so the telephone, right? And my Nyquist frequency is, of course, 4 kilohertz. What happens if I capture a sound which is greater than the Nyquist frequency? So I'm capturing here, for example, a 7 kilohertz sound. A 7 kilohertz sound. It is not filtered out, okay? It's not like you don't hear it, but you hear it differently. You hear it differently. It's like when you see a car passing by, okay, and the hubcaps, okay, are too fast for you to see them. Imma, funnily enough, they seem to be rotating backwards instead of forwards, right? That is because the rotation of the hubcap is being aliased, is being perceived to be different. In that case, it's even negative because it's going in the reverse direction. But in the case of sound, we don't have negative frequencies. But in the case of sound, we have an aliased frequency. How does this happen? As you can see, the 7 kilohertz, okay, is 3 kilohertz greater than the Nyquist frequency. The Nyquist is 4, 7 is 3 kilohertz greater. That 7 kilohertz sound is perceived as a 1 kilohertz sound, a mirror image. So the 3 more is perceived as 3 less. As 3 less. Not 3 less like our roads, 3 kilohertz less. So we end up hearing it as a 1 kilohertz sound. So instead of a high-pitched 7 kilohertz, we perceive it, our ears perceive it as a less high-pitched sound of 1 kilohertz. So, if you try to emit a 30 kilohertz sound on your speakers, okay, and you can hear it, sorry, you're not Superman. It's not even your ears which are able to perceive it, Terjan. It's the speaker system, which, because it is a non-expensive, a non-professional speaker system, if you have one, okay, I'm not referring to you, right? That speaker system assumes that you're going to play up to 20 kilohertz. So any frequency which is not below 20 kilohertz ends up being aliased. So probably the 30 kilohertz you think you're listening to is actually being played at 10 kilohertz, which is within your range of hearing. So that is what we mean by alias. Of course, alias in common terms means a nickname, right? A different name for the same person. Enough Maria Teresa alias Martes, for example, or Charles alias Carmelo. So likewise here, an actual sound is captured as a different sound. Okay, the 7 kilohertz is captured as a 1 kilohertz sound. Because after all, what we're doing here is we are capturing, okay, we are recording. So there are these sounds out there in the open. Your limited sampling rate microphone is foolishly capturing those frequencies beyond its Nyquist rate as a lesser sound. Your ears do not do that. Okay? Our ears do not alias frequencies which are higher than our 20 kilohertz range, because the way we perceive sound is not through a sample rate. Okay? It's more like a low pass filter. Okay? In a low pass filter, frequencies higher than a threshold, in our case 20 kilohertz, are ignored. Okay? Are removed. This, of course, does have some implication. Let me explain what is that implication. So if I have Audacity, okay, is we're going to create a new track, and this track I'm going to use an 8 kilohertz sampling rate.